Right. Well, welcome everyone to Greening USA's uh, Green Bag Lunch on the topic of the Micron DEIS review. And I crafted for what it was worth, the subtitle, Do They Really Expect Anyone Will Read This 20,000 page report? As we get into this process for responding to what OSIDA, Micron, and the Department of Commerce has issued, Greening USA felt it was important to share what we have found so far and to have a discussion about what needs to be done in terms of, submitting comments and we thought we could help the community with this discussion to figure out how and what to comment about. My name is John Prespior. I'm the president of Greening USA, which is a totally volunteer, not-for-profit organization in central New York, which, as most of you know, promotes sustainability uh, of the community. Just as a reminder to everybody, you can become a member. Dues, I believe, are still pretty nominal, $40 a year, if I've got that right. And if you'd rather not be an official member, we would gladly accept your donations to help us continue with the work that we've been doing. By way of introduction, I don't think that we have anything else. So I think with the agenda that we've planned for today, I think we should just move on a little bit. I just want to share with you who you will be hearing from shortly, and I'm going to spare reading all of this, but Catherine Landis, Hillary, Khadija Ahmad, Tim Judson, Peter Arsenault, and myself will address issues in the DEIS for you as we begin. I put Jan Kublik's name up here because we thought he might be able to join us as a substitute to talk about the general process of NEPA and SEQRA in particular in this case. But apparently Jan is not going to join us. And in a little bit of confusion about the final speaker list this morning and who might not be available, I failed to include Don Hughes's name here. Don is a part of the Northern New York Sierra Club and a PhD and professor of chemistry, most recently with Lemoyne College. And so why are we here? It's to do with the Onondaga County's recent release of the draft environmental impact statement. I'm not sure if you can see at the top of the screen, but because it's covered up by my chat, my Zoom tools, there should be the link there and for reaching this document, if and reaching this page, and the two other buttons that OSIDA has included so that you can read the document, download it, or get information on how to comment. So if you haven't done that yet, check out OSIDA's page here and get the document. Today's discussion offers a couple of different objectives for those of you that may not have had an opportunity to take a look at the document. It'll be a good way for you to get introduced to what we are finding here. For those of you who have been looking at this document and are interested in commenting or have already prepared some comments, this is a way to perhaps get some feedback and have a little discussion, and maybe hear an alternate viewpoint that we may not have considered. And so our plan is to have our speakers talk for perhaps the first hour, and trying to wrap up with about 30 minutes of um, discussion and questions and answers. Just created this slide to let you know that there are some important dates coming up. July 19th, tomorrow, is an in-person workshop at May Memorial Unitarian Society, and I'm sure Kadisha will give you more information about that when she speaks. July 24th is a full day of public hearings that OSIDA and the Department of Commerce will be holding at the Liverpool High School. And August 11th is the last day to submit public comments, unless, of course, we see an extension of that time, which we have requested. So the cover page of the environmental impact statement is this graphic here. You can see it's a joint document with the CHIPS for America, Onondaga County, the Corps of Engineers, and the environmental in the EPA. At the first page in the document, you'll find some basic information, which is kind of interesting. And I guess I would say don't overlook it. Take a look at that. The one thing I did find when I kind of looked at this page a little more carefully was that in the affected regions, I was glad to find that Oneida and Seneca counties were included as affected regions. But when you look at the study area that the DEIS uses in its analysis, Oneida County is not included as part of the study area, and I believe like Seneca County neither. Um, so it's a complex document. One of the reasons why Greening USA has been part of the group's Sustain CNY to request an extension of time. Very loaded with a lot of information. The environmental analysis section here lists those 17 chapters, actually 16 chapters and one summary effects chapter, but the cumulative effects chapter is also very important, as well as the proposed action and the alternatives. This somewhat simplified table of context, though, hides the fact that within each of these environmental analysis areas, as a complex breakdown of both construction related phase impact and operational phase impacts, as well as growth related impacts. So making sense of any of these sections takes a lot of time, and I think supports another reason why the public really needs more time to be able to take a look at this. This is probably the last slide that I think I prepared. Yep. And I am going to now turn this over to Hillary. Are you here with us? And hopefully you have some general statements, but whatever you had planned for us, I'm going to figure out how to stop the share. And now I can't see it. I guess I got to hit this button and turn it over to Hillary.
Thanks, John. Is it possible for me to screen share?
Yes, go ahead and do it. If you have to request, hit the request button and you'll get the permission.
Okay. All I'm putting up is the contact information for people to write down if they like to do things that way instead of digitally all the time. Hello, everyone who's here. Hello, people who might be watching this recording. My name is Hill Coppola. I'm a community organizer. I work for the Onondaga Nation very closely with their general counsel, Joe Heath. I work in collaboration and consultation with Onondaga Nation leadership, some community leaders, Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force. I'm active with Neighbors of the Onondaga Nation, which is a grassroots committee of the Syracuse Peace Council, and try to help out with environmental concerns the nation has. So Micron is one of those things. Obviously, there's a lot at stake if this project is not performed to the best possible standard. And the folks who have been reviewing the DEIS and helping to get that information together have noted a lot of gaps in the DEIS, which I think some of the subsequent speakers will talk more about. But I don't have much prepared, so I don't think I'm going to take the whole 6 to 8 minutes that John recommended, but I just want to provide a little context in terms of the county and ongoing environmental issues on Onondaga land. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the pollution that has been done to Onondaga Lake by mostly Allied Chemical, now Honeywell. So this area has a long and ongoing history with environmental pollution caused by industrial players. And we obviously do not want that to happen again, as Onondaga Lake is now a Superfund site and will need ongoing containment and remediation and monitoring for forever, really, unless the cleanup is finished. So the county has a history with the nation, which used to be better. Lately, that relationship has not been going so well. There's a very good article in Central Current, which I can share with folks after this, that kind of goes over the nation's efforts to get some land back on the shore of Onondaga Lake in collaboration with the county. The county has since shut down those conversations, and it's not a good sign. It would be a very good thing for the county to return land. I think it would open up a lot of relationships between the county and with the nation and with constituents who support land justice work. And that is directly connected to how the county operates with regard to Micron, right? Because if we can't trust the county to continue conversations in good faith about giving a very small piece of land back to the nation, then how can we trust them to act in good faith with Micron, right? Especially when there's so much on the line. So unfortunately, we see the county administration kind of falling in line with the federal administration in regards to environmental protections, right? The weakening of regulations, and being very urgent to get this started without the appropriate attention to the numerous details, of which you'll hear some later today. I don't know if John mentioned the length of the document, but you might have all heard 20,000 pages. That's with the appendices, which is just an incredible amount of information that is simply not humanly possible to review in 45 days. 120 days was the amount that the experts we've been working with recommended. We see that as a minimum. Obviously, more would be better on such a document. And so far, we have not received any response from the lead agencies or from the county about our request for a comment extension. We sent in a petition with 1,600 signatures, haven't received a response to that. And since then, of course, folks have been submitting initial comments, making that request directly as well. And it's not at all unusual for lead agencies and environmental review processes to grant an extension very early on in that comment period. And so this is an unusual situation in which we haven't heard anything back and no extension has been granted. And so public pressure on that point is needed. So we encourage everybody to reach out to folks in your networks, groups you're involved in, your faith communities if you have them, and encourage everybody to send a very quick message asking for that comment extension. The public hearings will be next week, so it would be great to get more in before we get to that point. And also, if you're planning on going to any of those hearings, also, of course, add into your comment the request for the extension. Trying to think if I have anything more to say besides that. No more toxic pollution on Onondaga land. That's my biggest point. And second point, please reach out to folks to submit a comment for a 120-day comment period. I know that Jobs to Move America is leading the process on getting a comment template for the public. For a second comment, you can submit more than one. And so I know that that will be coming out soon as well. Thanks all for listening to me. I'll pass it back to you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Hill, very much. I suppose I don't want to really entertain questions until the end, but if there is a question, audience, please put it in the chat and we will deal with it accordingly. And but now I'd like to have Catherine Landis have the floor.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Hillary. Just going to pull my screen up here. I put a few slides together. So I'm going to be talking about some of the biological resources that are discussed in the DEIS. So wetlands, bats, and birds. And these three things have a couple things in common. One is they're really important features of the Micron site. Secondly, there's a lot of discussion about these in the DEIS. There's some kind of compensation or mitigation for all three of these features. And spoiler alert, we don't think that mitigation is sufficient. And I should say that this presentation I'm giving is based on the work of a technical team. It certainly is not all my expertise. I don't know that much about bats, especially. So I just want to acknowledge our team here.
Hey, Catherine, could you,
Yes.
Your screen keeps jumping around. It's like your cursor's on your button to do something.
Oh, okay.
Or hit
That's
slideshow.
better.
Is that better? Okay. Yeah, I actually
It's still not full screen, but it's not jumping, so that's good.
All right.
Is it
Still doing it.
Is it full screen?
Yeah,
No.
try the slideshow.
Huh.
Do you have it on
Okay.
slideshow?
Oh, you know what? I think what I have to do is get out, put it on full screen, stop sharing. Sorry about this. I think I have to put it on full slide before I share. Okay. Oops.
Of course,
No.
then you can't see your share button.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, so I don't think it's absolutely necessary to put it on before.
Well, let's try once more. I mean, if not, you can just look at I think you can see the pictures. Okay, I should be able to pop it into full screen. Is that better?
Yeah, it keeps going back and forth.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, well, we're just gonna work with what we got here. Let's see. Okay, share. All right, well, I'll make it a little bigger anyway. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but
Staying in one place at least.
at least it's staying in one place, so
Yeah,
that's a little bit better. All
and
right,
the
well,
audience, don't forget that the audience can go into their full screen for their Zoom
sure.
client as well. That'll help. So
Yeah, so
that looks
yeah,
good.
I just want to kind of a reminder of wetlands and what they are. Basically, they're places where land and water meet, where you have a high water table. And what I'm showing here is a couple of the different kinds of wetlands that are found on the Micron site. So there's emergent marsh, which basically you have things like cattails, or in degraded areas, things like Phragmites, shrub swamps, as well as forested wetlands. So there's actually a good diversity of wetlands. You know, I wouldn't say they're pristine, but the shrub swamps and the forested wetlands in particular would be dominated by native species. So that's a good thing. So here we have the Micron site outlined by yellow, and we're looking at the wetlands that were delineated for the mitigation process, a total of about 400. Most of it's emergent. That would be your cattails, you know, maybe some Phragmites. 30 acres of shrub swamp, 154 of forested wetlands. And when I look at this map, one of the things I notice is that there's wetlands all over the property. I mean, they're concentrated, you know, maybe in the north and east end, but this is a wet place. And I think those who've been thinking about this for a while know that the water table's near the surface and it's a pretty big, flat, wet site. This is straight out of the DEIS, just a reminder of all the good things that wetlands do for us, including groundwater recharge, certainly flood prevention. They hold floodwaters, nutrient removal. A couple things that are not here that Hillary, who's not here today, unfortunately, pointed out was the carbon storage function of wetlands, and they also help with temperature moderation in terms of climate change. So this is good. This is in the DEIS, and as a result of all these services, of course, they're protected by law. So if you destroy wetlands, as Micron plans to do, 200 out of those 400 acres, they have to compensate the public for those losses. And I just might add that even though only 200 acres will be destroyed outright, we can expect indirect impacts just from the sheer amount of impervious surfaces. I think there's something like 1,200 parking spaces. And I can't remember the acreage of impervious surfaces, but it's high. So yes, 200 acres, but probably all 400 acres will be impacted and probably degraded. You can go to Appendix F and read the mitigation plan. What I'm showing here is the map. So Micron, the yellow polygon here, and then each of these little orange things is one of the mitigation sites that they've chosen to replace those wetlands lost at Micron. This is just a picture of what they look like now, or at least one of them. And there's the kind of the good news and the bad news. The good news is they're taking former sites that were probably formerly wetlands, like agricultural land, and restoring them back to wetlands. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is this wetland or this parcel here obviously is not going to provide all those services, you know, anytime soon. It's going to take decades until this has developed to the point where we can really say that those services lost at Micron are being replaced. And I think this is one of the mitigation sites, but I think all of them look pretty much the same. So just some recommendations. First of all, the replacement ratio right now is about 2 to 1. That's a bit of an average, but roughly. And so I would recommend, and our group recommended, that the wetlands be replaced at a much higher ratio. I mean, why not 7 to 1, 8 to 1, 10 to 1? Just because of all the lost services, the indirect impacts from development, the fragmentation. You know, you take a big wetland and replace it with lots of little pieces, lose services. And then, you know, to address the issue that these replacement wetlands aren't wetlands yet, protect nearby blocks of mature wetlands. Obviously, large sites are preferred. And then another factor would be to just make sure that those restoration targets are enforced, so monitoring doesn't end after 10 years, 15 years. I mean, those are just some suggestions. As people have said, it's a long document. We certainly haven't gone through every part of it related to wetlands, but those are some recommendations we came up with kind of at a first read. So jumping to bats, of course, bats are related to wetlands. They live in wetlands many times because of the insect food, water. There's often roost sites and dead trees. There's a lot of bats found on the site. 3 of them happen to be listed as endangered. The tricolored bat is actually not listed, but proposed for listing. And surveys have shown that there are maternity roosts for 2 of these bats. In other words, they like the site so much that they're actually roosting there and raising young. So just kind of the upshot, to jump to the chase here, is that these endangered bats are experiencing free falls, and the document, to its credit, talks a lot about this. And in some cases, there's 100% decline because of white nose syndrome, habitat loss, and other factors. Unfortunately, there's little evidence that these mitigation sites would be used by the bats. In addition, they kind of assume that the endangered bats have the same level of tolerance to disturbance as some of the more generalist bats, like the little brown bats. So they need to do a lot more homework. And honestly, for the bats, it's the wrong site. So just quickly with the birds, in the interest of time, one thing we're recommending is that they consider all birds. So they cited New York Breeding Bird Atlas studies that shows that there are about 105 species of birds either breeding or possibly breeding on the site. So it's a birdie place. However, in terms of replacement land and mitigation strategies, they only address grassland species. So our recommendation is we support land conservation for all bird species, including neotropical migrant songbirds, some of the wetland birds. There's a heron rookery on the site. So support things like places like the Central New York Land Trust and buying land for habitat. For the housing, support native plant landscaping. So some of the development could be bird friendly. And again, bump up the habitat replacement ratio. Right now they have 3 to 1. We're asking for more just because of the cumulative habitat loss anticipated. Of course, larger blocks of habitat are preferred. Right now they're saying 25 acres. We're saying bump that up, particularly for these owls who are grassland birds that have been seen on the site. And then the DEIS also fails to consider stopover habitat. So it considers nesting habitat and other kinds of habitat for birds. And lighting could be a big issue because many birds migrate at night, and as they're flying over, they can be disoriented by a lot of lighting at night. So I think that's all I have. It's trying to stick to my time. So obviously, if you have any questions about any of that, put it in the chat. I know it was kind of a quick run through of a lot of topics that have a lot of complexity, but I'm going to stop there for now and turn it over to Don.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. And I'll just
Sure.
throw it out there, and I don't know that you have the answer. You don't have to address
Okay.
it now, but just for everybody's thinking, like,
Sure.
what's the relationship between bats and mosquito population?
Oh,
And
that's
it's
a really
one thing
good
that
point.
came up
Yeah.
at a meeting earlier.
Yeah, so a single bat can eat about 1,000 mosquitoes in a night. So if you start kind of interfering with these bat populations, you're just going to get less pesticide-free mosquito control. So I talked about the services with kind of the social cultural services related to wetlands, but any of these, bats, certainly birds also eat a lot of insects. So good point. birds eat a lot of caterpillars, right? That you might not want on your plants. So, I mean, in the
Yeah.
thousands. So good
Thanks.
point. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yep.
Don, your turn.
Okay, thank you. So I want to be able to share, and I'm going to go there, and I already selected my window, so I'm not, did it. Can you see the construction of the facility slide?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Not full screen, but you see your screen.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a whirl despite Catherine's problems. Maybe this will work. I don't know. There.
There we go.
Right, great. So that's you know, you see all these pictures of what the finished product is, but this is what it looks like on the way. This is from Boise. So what I'm gonna talk about, if I can get there. Why? What's this doing this? All right. Well, I guess this is a good place to start. So I'm going to address the three aspects of Micron's operation, and to put that in context, I just want to portray the chips manufacturing process here as kind of a big chemical equation where they take in silicon wafers and they produce all these chips from it, but it includes a lot of chemicals. You know what? We're looking at the wrong thing here, guys. I'm sorry. Something just didn't happen right. I don't. Yeah, this is the wrong. This is the wrong file. I apologize. I don't know why.
You need us to move on and come back to you, Don?
No. Can you see Micron in Clay, New York?
We don't see a share at this
You're
point.
not sharing. Okay, let me.
You need to share.
Okay, let me go back and share. Share. Come on. Share. Okay. Share. Good. All right.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, great. I apologize. It's Micron and Clay. Okay, so let's just move along here. All right, so this is what I'm going to talk about: chemicals, water pollution, air pollution. This is the overall process of what goes in and what comes out. So I'm going to focus on the chemical inputs, the wastewater coming out, and the air emissions coming out. And let's get this out of the way. So chemicals, so a lot of chemicals go into the semiconductor process. And this chart that's down here shows an example, two examples actually from a published research paper, chips plants that make the same kind of product that Micron does. It's memory chips, DRAM and NAND. And just to call your attention to the bottom lines here in this chart, the tonnages, 45,000, 46,000 tons per year of chemicals, and lots of variety, over 400 types of chemicals. And most of those things are either gases or liquids. And the considerations that one's got to think about is how do you safely handle these things, transport them to the facility, store them at the facility, react to spills, because inevitably there are spills. There's worker safety issues, and then there's the emissions, the release of some of this stuff back into the environment. A wide variety of things. I'm going to just want to point out a few categories that of specific interest. PFAS, perfluorinated alkyl substances. These are the so-called forever chemicals. They're highly toxic, and they are used by the semiconductor industry. A closely related group are perfluorinated compounds, PFCs. Those are gases. And I'm going to talk about those towards the end when we're talking about air pollutants. And I'm going to skip these other ones. It's just a lot of categories, but there are some specifically very toxic gases that the semiconductor industry uses: arsine, phosphine, nitrogen trifluoride. These are pretty deadly.
Yeah, Don, I just want to give you a reminder of our time frame, and so if you could, focus on what you see may be deficient in the DEIS, that would help us.
Yeah, I'm getting to that, John.
Okay.
So this is so the deficiency that I'm getting at with the chemicals is that they haven't identified them. So this is an example chart from the DEIS, and they list these categories of things, but what are they? It's not, some of them are identified, but largely they are not. And so that's the first comment here, is you can't properly assess environmental risk, human health risk, if you don't name the chemicals. And the Department of Commerce, and they've issued a document, which is a generic document, which does list all the chemicals. So Micron needs to do that, not only identify them, but tell us how much they're using. This is relevant to spills, it's relevant to human health, it's relevant to environmental controls. Next thing is I want to talk about water pollution. And so the segue here is locally at the site, we've got to, can they talk less loudly? The possibility of spills always exists, and that will contaminate groundwater. And there's also the problem of it getting into stormwater and then contaminating local creeks. As far as wastewater goes, this is the situation. So Micron is going to have a pretreatment plant that handles their wastewater. They haven't said what that is at all. That will generate industrial sludge, thousands of tons, and they say it's going to be reused. I can't imagine how that would be reused. It's not stated. And then they're sending it over to Onondaga County. And Onondaga County has been having some, you may have seen the news about their sludge drying operation and all kinds of problems with that. We're entrusting the county to be able to use highly advanced technology to deal with PFAS. So in this first step, the industrial wastewater treatment system, that's where the PFAS treatment would take place. They haven't specified which technology they're going to use. A lot of this wastewater, the treated wastewater, we get sent back to Micron for other uses, but about a quarter of it will continue on to the sewage treatment plant. Sewage treatment plants are totally incapable of treating PFAS. So if there's any PFAS that gets out of this, it'll either go out to the river or end up in the sludge. And certainly this will create PFAS contaminated sludge. And since there's PFAS over here, all these things are going to have PFAS in them. So where's that going to go? That's a big issue. Lay a big picture here is there. This is the Micron plant over here in this little box. This is the county sewage treatment plant. They're going to discharge into the Oneida River, which goes into the Oswego River, which of course drains into Lake Ontario. And we have this issue here where the county is taking in drinking water from the lake right over here. It's a short distance, maybe a couple miles from the outlet of the river. So we have a possibility of taking in what they've spewed out. If there's a spill, that will get out into the lake and cause all kinds of problems. Lake Ontario, of course, is a international body of water, so the Canadians may be upset by this. Let's talk a little bit specifically about PFAS, because the situation from a regulatory point of view is not good. The regulators have focused on 2 out of this universe of something like 12,000 compounds. So these 2 compounds, bad actors from the past, are no longer used for semiconductor manufacturing. But this is where the regulations, what few we have, are focused. The analytical methodology they're using takes in a total of 40 compounds, but there's thousands that get used, is the problem. And there's transformations. It is really a mess. PFAS. I'm going to skip this slide just because in the interest of time, but trust me, there's a lot of human health effects of PFAS. So the big problem overall is that the DEIS doesn't really even acknowledge the impact of this pollution going into Lake Ontario. It just focuses on the local situation. Next big thing is that we're entrusting the county, and you heard Hell talk about that, the county to treat these forever chemicals properly. And I have my doubts about their ability to do that. It's compounded by the fact that it's very difficult to monitor the PFAS. And the bottom line is that the regulators, the New York State DEC, and certainly the EPA, have not much interest in controlling this stuff. Certainly, if you look at what's on the books, there's almost nothing. So the DEIS says, well, we're going to follow the rules and meet the discharge requirements, but there are no rules. Okay, finally, air emissions. I put these into 3 different categories. The NACs, these are standard pollution kind of things that one associates with cars and factories. Carbon monoxide, NOx, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter. And then there's hazardous air pollutants, which New York State does a pretty good job of regulating. But then there's another category of emissions which is not regulated, and I call them the ERGs. And I'm just going to walk you through how this is addressed or not addressed in the DEI.
Yeah, try to wrap up pretty quickly, Don, so we can move on. We've still got like 4 speakers.
Okay, I understand. So NACs, we've got a couple pollutant categories which are close, very close to the threshold. The hazardous air pollutants, the ones highlighted, also very close to the threshold based on the models. Models are imperfect. And I've got other complaints about where they're modeling, but I won't get into that. And then finally, this is the situation that concerns me the most is these unregulated compounds. So they're going to be incinerating these perfluorinated compounds. A lot of that stuff is going to pass through the incinerator and get emitted into the air. But the additional problem is that when you incinerate these things, which are inherently not burnable, they're not flammable substances, you create products, hazardous products of incomplete combustion, which are not regulated at all. They're not monitored, and there's no limits. All right, so there's the nutshell. They're not identifying the chemicals that they're using in the DEIS. We've got issues, potential for spills, which are really not addressed. The PFAS issues, very difficult, very toxic, very difficult to treat, and they're very toxic. And we're going to have a lot of contaminated sludge coming out of this process. And then what I just talked about with the air pollutants, we've got modeled things which are very close to the limits, and populations nearby that will probably be affected by those. And that's my talk.
Thank you very much, Don. And hey, sorry to have to push you along, but we want to hear from Tim next. So, Tim, it's all
everyone,
yours.
and thanks for being here and joining us. So I'm going to talk about the energy system impacts of the Micron development. And I think the thing to really understand about Micron as an energy consumer is that it will be completely out of scale, not only with our local energy system and infrastructure here in central New York and the Syracuse metro area, but actually out of scale with the entire state. And the DEIS doesn't even scratch the surface of what those impacts would be. And I'm going to kind of give you sort of a brief overview of that. But to be sort of just to kind of break it down into its basics, there's really 4 areas that I would highlight that are both important to understand about the energy system impacts of Micron, but also things that are basically not properly addressed in the EIS. So from the electricity standpoint, and this has been mentioned in several places, but I think it's important to put it in context, is that the amount of electricity that Micron will use is just massive. In their various sort of documents and applications, they say that it'll consume over 16 million megawatt hours of electricity per year. Now that to give you a sense of the scale of that, because it's hard to kind of get your mind around some of these wonky energy units, that's more than the amount of electricity that the states of Vermont and New Hampshire together use per year. It's more than a third of the amount of electricity that New York City consumes per year. And so I'm going to share a couple of things to give you a sense of what that means. So this is a map of New York State's grid. And so New York State's grid is broken up into 11 what are called zones that are basically the ways in which the different transmission lines and substations and infrastructure are grouped together in local areas. So we are in zone C, which you see here in the kind of the teal color in the middle of the state. Which is a very large area. It includes all of central New York, some of western New York, some of the southern tier. We are the largest net exporting zone for electricity in the state, meaning we generate typically about 50% or more electricity that we consume in Zone C each year. That supports the grid for the entire rest of the state. If Micron is built out to its full capacity, we will become one of the largest net importing electricity zones in the state, meaning that the entire rest of the state's grid is going to be affected by the operation of this facility. And and there's nothing within within the DEIS or other Micron's other documents to explain how we're going to, how that impact is going to be mitigated. And that has both emissions impacts, it has electricity cost impacts, it has other environmental impacts, and it has impacts on the reliability and the other infrastructure of our energy system. So the next slide that I'm going to share is to give you a sense of what that means. This So this is a chart that the New York Independent System Operator, which runs our electricity system and the grid in our markets, publishes every year, showing basically the amount of electricity consumed in each zone of the state each year, and then projects forward. And so what you see is that, as of, currently, the amount of electricity Micron would consume is more than 10% of the electricity of the entire state would consume. It is, more than the total amount of electricity that Zone C consumes, and is, as I said, more than a third of what New York City consumes. So this is just a massive amount of electricity. Now, to put this sort of in context of where the environmental impacts come from, we have two operative laws that relate to what the impacts that Micron should be mitigating. One is our climate law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which both sets statewide targets for emissions reductions and targets for our electricity system and our transportation system, which is to reach 70% renewable electricity statewide by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. Now, in the baseline analysis in the DEIS, Micron assumes that there will be, that almost all of that, all the electricity will come from fossil fuel generation. And so there's a baseline analysis that shows a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions that essentially would prevent the state from meeting its emissions reduction goals. They then sort of try to wipe that all clean by saying simply that they will buy renewable energy credits for the electricity to power the plant. Now, that's a completely inadequate analysis for a number of reasons. One is that we don't have enough new renewable energy sources, in development in New York right now to meet the demand of the electricity demand that Micron would add to our grid. So keep in mind that, as I showed in that chart from NISO, the loads that Micron would be adding to the grid aren't currently counted in the forecasts that our energy system is planning for. So the huge amount of electricity demand that Micron will be adding to the grid isn't currently accounted for in our system planning. But to the state's credit, in 2022 we passed the New York Green Chips Act, which, as one of its requirements, requires that the microchip manufacturing facilities like Micron have to be powered with 100% renewable energy. The trouble is we don't have that much new renewable electricity capacity being developed in New York State. So the loads that without that kind of planning, the loads that Micron would be adding to our grid would by default be powered by increased utilization of natural gas generation, because those are the only power plants we have on the grid that have the capacity to ramp up when needed because they're not fully utilized. Unless Micron includes a plan for developing enough new renewable energy to power the facility, there will be unmitigated greenhouse gas emission impacts, and that has related implications. One is that this is basically a less than 2 square mile facility that would be consuming all this electricity. So there's a tremendous amount of electricity that would need to be generated elsewhere that would have to be delivered to the site. And that means, a lot of related infrastructure, transmission lines, other, substations, other distribution system infrastructure. as well as things like battery storage, because in order to integrate the amount of renewable energy that we're moving towards under the CLCPA, we'll need to also be augmenting the grid with with other technologies like storage and demand response and other things. None of that is anywhere mentioned here. But in order to deliver that amount of electricity to the site, there's going to be environmental impacts from siting transmission lines and siting substations in order to make just the basic operation of the facility possible. None of that is really mentioned here. And Micron has tried to basically sort of tried to sort of ignore the fact that that's going to be necessary, in all of its other planning, including a proceeding that it went into with the Public Service Commission to cover to allow for the development of power lines from the substation across the street from the site to go to the site last year. There's also a plan for a high-pressure natural gas pipeline extension to deliver a large amount of fracked gas to the site to do certain things, like power the incineration operation that Don mentioned in his presentation. That is also an energy issue because it is gas infrastructure that's used for our energy system. But it will also have greenhouse gas emissions from the incineration process, as well as the toxic emissions that Don mentioned. Then there's the transportation system impacts, which includes both the shipping transportation, trains and heavy duty trucks to deliver materials to the site and to transport things away, which is estimated in the EEIS. That's sort of an unavoidable thing. But there is the 12,000, but there is essentially the commuter transportation for workers and other people going to the site. That is, you get a sense of the scale of it in this mention of a 12,000 parking space parking lot facility on the site. And there's 9,000 expected employees to be hired when the site is fully in operation. So that's a lot of transportation, to and from Micron on a daily basis. That really isn't addressed fully in how it's mitigated. But also under New York state law, we know that by 2035, 100% of new vehicle sales in New York have to be with zero emission vehicles. That's largely battery electric vehicles, obviously. And of course, with the large number of well-paying jobs that they're expecting to create at the site, workers are going to be buying a lot of new cars. So we know that there's also going to be, an energy system impact from the electricity needed to power the cars. Now, that could also be mitigated by various things like vehicle to grid charging that could be placed in the parking lot to both provide, grid balancing, battery storage of electricity on site that could be used to power the plant and balance the grid. So not just an energy consumer, but potentially something that could be beneficial to the plant's impact on the grid. But again, this is not addressed in any way in the DEIS. And so, this is going to the comments that we're planning to offer, and what we would encourage people to mention in theirs as well, is that this DEIS needs to provide a much more complete and thorough estimation or evaluation of the energy system impacts that the plant will have, and that it can't rely simply on, sort of a pat statement that Micron will buy renewable energy credits, because the enormous scale of this facility is going to require much more than that, in order for the plant to operate. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Tim, very much. Peter.
Thanks, John and Tim. I want to pick up on something that Tim just mentioned in passing. He said it's sort of an unavoidable impact when he was referring to transportation. They have a whole section on unavoidable impacts that I kind of take exception to, because I think a lot of the things, not all of them, but some of the things are avoidable, and they're just sort of passed off as, we're going to build a plant. This is the preferred alternative. You can't avoid making these big impacts. I think there are things that could reduce the impacts that haven't been considered. So one of the things I've been focused on is looking at the construction impacts related to the energy. Tim was looking at the operational energy. There's a huge interest in the architectural world and the construction world right now on embodied energy. What's the energy contained within the materials and the building process and so forth? Glenn Coyne, a month or two ago, had an article in the Post Standard, and I'm not sure where the numbers came from, but they seem plausible. He said that for each of the 4 fabs, 680,000 cubic yards of concrete will be required. That's just for one fab. For all 4, it'd be like 2.7 billion cubic yards of concrete. And everyone assumes, well, got to use concrete to build, right? You don't have to use high carbon content concrete to build. And that's not being looked at. Conventional, well, the amount of carbon embodied in concrete in the process, most of it comes from the cement processing, breaking down limestone and lime in a high temperature kiln and so forth, spews a whole lot of CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the air. How much depends on the plant and where it is and how far it's going along. Sort of an average might be on the order of it's measured in kilograms, 600 kilograms as a number. It could be anywhere between 500 and 700, could be more or less than that. But it's quite possible to split that in half, all right, just using standard technology and so forth. So that instead of one fab generating 408 million tons, kilograms of carbon dioxide, we could probably cut that in half to around 200. It's not perfect, but it's better. But when you look at the sheer numbers of these things, it's a major impact. The other thing that's happening with the construction is that this is going to take 16 years, they keep pointing out, to build all 4 fabs, all right? I'm expecting within the next 4 or 5 years, it'll be possible to take that 50% number and get it down to 25% or even 10% of the amount of carbon. And there's no, this is just in the concrete. A lot of the concrete is obviously mixed locally. The cement may come from elsewhere. So there are local and further ranging impacts, but that seems to be a big deficiency, that the assumption is, well, we just got to live with this. And I think we need to point out that no, we don't. Related material is steel. Steel has another high energy content, unless it's recycled steel, and unless instead of using it in a fossil fuel powered plant, you use it in an electric arc processing facility. And as it turns out, Auburn Steel is not that far away and has had a specialty in doing that for quite some time. So I think it's worth pointing out that it would be incumbent on the construction to consider higher use of low carbon steel, low carbon footprint steel for the construction of the plants. They're talking about again, large numbers. I'm not going to pull it up, but large numbers of steel go into the plant construction as well. So those the first things that I think need to be pointed out, that we don't need to treat these as unavoidable. We can do something about them. That same approach applies to. I was just chatting with Catherine that maybe we need to see better use of the land use so that we aren't impacting as much of the wetlands. They do talk during construction about noise pollution and address it and say, well, that's going to be unavoidable. They do have some mitigation measures, but they say, yeah, but we can only do so much. And I think that that's an approach that could be looked at better. It's going to be 16 years of a lot of noise going on during the construction. Don had that picture up of all the construction activity. There's going to be cranes and trucks and all sorts of stuff going on for quite a while. So it's not like, oh yeah, well, it's going to be, you know, like building a house down the road. It's a temporary inconvenience. 16 years, all right? It means that the people in the first plant are going to be working with a lot of noise going on while they're building the second plant. And then the people in the two plants are going to be working with a lot of noise and dust and stuff going on while they build the third plant. So there's this time element there that probably needs to be addressed. And the last thing that they talk about is unavoidable transportation issues. And they spent a whole lot of time on traffic studies and the impacts on different intersections and how it's going to take years and phasing to make highways bigger and add lanes and so forth. And they say, of course, well, OSIDA doesn't have any control over that. That's up to the state and the feds, you know. But we figure it's going to need to happen. It's the only way to mitigate all this extra traffic. Well, I take exception to that too, because unless I've missed it, I haven't seen any discussion about alternatives to driving cars to get there. Or driving, yes, there's a railroad spur to move stuff in and out, so that'll help reduce maybe the number of trucks that are going in and out. Maybe it won't, I don't know. But it would be great to see some real mass transit options for employees instead of whatever it is, 12,000 parking spaces or something. You know, to get something that addresses alternatives to simply driving in cars and trucks. And that's a glaring oversight, in my opinion. I doubt anyone's going to be biking to the plant, although they probably could if they chose to. I mean, just because of the size and scale of it. But you can certainly run any number of mass transit options, whether it's something through Centro, you know, and rubber-based tire system or a light rail system. All of those things certainly seem to be possible. So I'll end with
Great, Peter. I think that's a great segue. Thank you. I'm sorry for cutting you in, but that's a great segue to hear from Khadijah, who's going to switch it over to a little more of the from the hardware to the softer socioeconomic side of the equation. Khadijah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Khadijah Ahmad. I'm the Syracuse-based organizing manager for Jobs to Move America, working specifically on this Micron project and the impact it's going to have on our community and environment and the workers and the residents. So in terms of the DEIS document and reviewing it, I have to admit I'm not an expert in the health hazards that workers might be exposed to, and so we are you know, working with chemical experts to like more thoroughly review the mitigation plans that Micron lists in the report, but it still leaves us with concerns around you know, making sure that the highest protocols and best standards are what we ask that they use in terms of mitigating health hazards, and also ask that these standards be public and enforceable as a condition of the CHIPS grant money. And there is mention of health and safety committees in the report, but we would like to see that there be a mechanism in place for the employees to be able to raise safety concerns without fear of retaliation or any sort of intimidation. And so worker-led health and safety committees are what we would want to see. You know, moving beyond just OSHA standards of safety, as we've, you know, discussed, that biomedical literature often has lower permissible exposure limits than necessarily what's considered legal right now for workers. Another concern we have is around the same lines, that while it's great that childcare is going to be provided on site, you know, the same concerns around health hazards and exposures to the toxic chemicals being used, and like what, you know, if the workers are at risk, then are the children that are on site potentially in the way of harm as well. We also have not seen any enforceable commitments around local and equitable hiring percentages. And so we would like to see more concrete numbers around that are enforceable, as well as, while there are apprenticeship programs and partnerships with community colleges and SU. We want to make sure that the folks that are being pulled into these programs, the folks that are hearing about these opportunities, are actually diverse in gender and ethnicity and socioeconomic demographics as well. What we have heard at times is that the makeup of these classrooms itself is primarily white male. And so we really would like to see some commitment to making sure that these apprenticeship and pathways to employment are actually reaching communities that have been left out of this sector, and also potentially commitments to actually hiring a certain number of people that complete these programs. So not just providing like, 500,000 towards this program, or 500 million towards this the OCC, clean room simulation lab, but like, are they committed to actually hiring from the pool that complete those programs? Another point of concern is that they do mention something around average jobs will be around $100,000, which is what sort of they've been saying in the past. But again, industry data for, what different titles make and the percentage of folks that are within each title suggests that $100,000 is not the median pay, so we would really like to see more transparency in what exact titles, production versus engineers versus technicians, and what their exact salaries will be. And, benefits information would be helpful as well. And to that point, some of the entry-level positions, we want to make sure are high paying from the start. So that is also something that we want to see commitment and transparency around the numbers. I think that is a quick overview. And yeah, if folks have questions at the end, I'm happy to go into more depth.
Great. Thank you very much, Khadijah. And thanks everyone for hanging in here with us so far. As you can see, there's a lot in this document. I'm just going to wrap up our comments on specific areas, but just hopefully brief as well, overview of the socioeconomic conditions related to housing primarily, okay? Based on a study that was the state had done, I think it was 2022, they called the Regional Economic Model Incorporated organization. They predict 64,000 new residents to the 5-county region by 2041. Some people think that that number might be low. This would translate to a household development of more than 27,000 across the 5-county region. In the city of Syracuse alone, 7,500 new households. While for some this is a potential adverse effect, that would not lead to significant economic conditions, because the proposed project would be facilitating growth consistent with applicable community plans according to the DEIS. However, the household growth anticipated would, and it is pointed out in the DEIS, would be of a scale that may be readily noticeable in terms of increased population densities, as well as increased commercial and residential activity. The project's induced population would be large enough to alter local and regional housing markets, and it would generate housing demand at a scale not experienced since the 1970s. But they also say that the local study area would experience increased demand for rental and for sale housing, which in turn could lead to increased property values, home purchase prices, and residential rents, which unfortunately could lead to indirect displacement of in the local study area, they say. But they don't spend a lot of time talking about the potential for displacing residents in the wider 5-county area as a result of housing costs increasing. I think that's a deficiency of the environmental impact statement. They recognize these adverse aspects of the project, but they claim that these will be short term, that within about 4 years, the housing market will adjust to balance out this situation. I'm not sure that that's the case. They also praise the rising housing costs as a mechanism to get improvements to housing stock that has been allowed to deteriorate over the years, particularly in the city of Syracuse. So there is little discussion of the impacts of creating close to 30,000 new households in the 5-county area, or in Onondaga County alone, 23,000 new households. There is little said about the greenhouse gas effects of adding this kind of a population to the community. And what they say about it is that it's insignificant compared to the greenhouse gas effects of the factory in and of itself. So there's really no need to take a look at those things. They say that any of that housing development will be subject to policies that are either existing or future policies that will exist, perhaps in the future, that could be modeled after Onondaga County's comprehensive plan, which is recommending community center approach and smart growth. But there's no requirements for any of this to happen. It's left up to the markets and to each town to manage those things. So whether that's sufficient or not, I personally doubt it. I think more needs to be analyzed in terms of the impacts of creating close to 30,000 additional housings, close to 25,000 additional housing needs in Onondaga County. I think with that, I do have some ideas for mitigating measures. Something that came up at a meeting we held a couple of weeks ago was perhaps a citizen conservation management council that would be involved in some of these things on an ongoing basis. And I'm wondering whether funding commitments by Micron or the county or New York State to minimize or eliminate the affordability crisis that rising housing prices will cause. My fear is we will see rise in homelessness, which is not mentioned in the DEIS, but certainly a concern when we already are facing somewhat of a housing crisis. So that's a quick kind of tour, but I think that people should pay attention to the growth inducing impacts as well as the direct impacts on the factory. And now it is 1:21. We finished before our time, but we haven't given you all a chance to raise questions or have any discussion. So if there are concerns or questions that people want to have, either raise your hand, and I see Dick has his hand up already. We will try to pay attention to that. And if you don't hear us responding to you, please speak up. Dick.
Yeah, so at the town hall in Clay last week, I can't remember, time is strangely moving these days. A resident talked about flood issues in that area. And obviously the wetlands are essentially a water sink and tend to mitigate flooding. And now that you're going to replace the wetland with all these hard surfaces, they have major concerns in that neighborhood that flooding will get significantly worse. And there was no mention in the EIS, or maybe there was, but I haven't read it, about how to plan for the potential of significant flooding among the residential neighborhoods surrounding the plant.
Thanks. Can anybody address that? Has anybody seen that?
Well, I'll just add, I mean, it's a really good point. Maddie's kind of our hydrologist, but those mitigation wetlands I showed you that were supposed to replace the functions of the lost wetlands, none of those are downstream from Micron. I mean, none of those will help with the flooding issue. They may help with habitat and some of the other functions, but they don't address the flooding, like if you look at flood maps. So that's maybe not an answer to the question, but reinforces your point there, Dick.
That's a good question in light of, changes in rainfall patterns that we're experiencing as well. So it's an important one to pay attention to and look at more closely.
Yeah, John, I could add something to that. Because Maddie has written up some pretty extensive comments about flooding, and it sounds like there could be a very serious issue. Not only the trading wetlands for impervious surfaces, rooftops, and so forth, but also the karst geology which underlies this facility is going to get dramatically altered, because when they build it, they have to excavate a whole bunch of rock and put in pilings and so forth. So it's a potentially gigantic issue.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure to get Khadijah back on and have her tell you about the workshop she's working for tomorrow. But it brings to mind the question of the alternative analysis here. Micron, and in this report, dismiss the possibility of making this plant smaller as a way to manage some of the environmental impacts, claiming that for the economic efficiency, they need 4 fabs. I saw some notes that Alma, I guess, had prepared, talking about the fact that in other fab projects, smaller fab installations have been developed. And so maybe it is not essential for a 4 fab project here in central New York. So if you're looking at the environmental impact statement, don't hesitate to take a look at the alternatives section in this thing and make comments about whether that is the logic behind it is correct. I see that Peter King and Peter Arsenal had their hands up. Maybe Peter King first. Okay.
Thanks. I really appreciate Catherine's and John's overview of the wetlands and how important that is, and also the mention of karst, which is not something we usually think about even in New York State. But I just put in the chat a while back. In 2020, Bill Capel, was with the USGS and some others, produced what probably one of the first I've ever seen an atlas of karst in New York State. And if you look through it, there is description of contamination risks from karst that we have, and also flooding, and I think these can happen faster than you think. And what's not mentioned in that study is that climate change is worldwide exacerbating the pressures on karst because of the intensity of rainwater. We get our rain faster and harder now, and so it's going to go through all those parking lots, and can create sinkholes much faster. And really, wetlands are possibly one of the ideal green infrastructures for that, but that's what's getting taken out. So thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Peter Arsenal?
Yeah, thanks. Just a real quick point, John, you were mentioning about reducing the the size of the fab plants. As I was looking through, there's like whatever it is, 1,300 acres here or something in this White Pines park. They talk about how many million square feet are the plant. Well, that's only it's not that many acres when you do the math. All right, so they're not covering the entire 13, whatever it is, like the entire industrial park with the plant. There's other things. I think what we should look at is recommending how can they reduce the impact, how can they move away from the wetlands, avoid the wetlands, how can they look at alternatives like mass transit to reduce the amount of parking so that it isn't just reducing the plant itself, but reducing the impact on the site. That was the only comment I wanted to make.
Well, thank you. Khadijah?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate about the workshop we're doing tomorrow, Saturday from 12 to 2 at May Memorial Unitarian Universalist Society on East Genesee Street. And the goal is to really mobilize the public and the community to start submitting comments. Jobs to Move America has created like an action network letter sending portal that folks can amend a template, like a very basic community template that they can add to or edit and submit comments to. So we're hoping to be live with that. Actually, I can share it. We're still talking to comms about like a couple small edits, but this will be the link. We'll be going live with it tomorrow. I'll also have printed out copies of the template to actually do like workshop style, write in your comment, work with the folks that are in the room to like make it personal, make it specific. And thank you to Dawn, Catherine, and Maddie, who are going to be our experts again to help with the audience discussion and getting into like the technical concerns. And I put the information in the chat, so please feel free to come and spread the word. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me directly.
Thanks, Khadijah. Yeah, I'll add to that. If there's anybody in this meeting today that wants to get more involved with working with the various groups that are looking at specific areas of this, please, get back to us, let us know, and we'll work to get you in touch with the appropriate groups. Don Hughes has been one of the sort of organizers of that, but between Don, Khadijah, Dick Kornbluth or myself or Peter Arsenault, reach out to any of us either through the chat here or to how you registered at greeningusa.org. So info@greeningusa.org. If you have any questions and want some follow up, you can also try info@sustainCNY.org as another source. As many of you know, Sustain CNY has now been in business for a couple of years, trying to keep in touch with the various groups in the area that are concerned about sustainability issues and working towards getting the best for Central New York. Some people might say, well, you guys are all against, having this factory. Well, I don't think that's true. We're against adverse impacts that are going to affect, our health, our safety, et cetera, While we all want to see, rising wealth in the community, we also want to be sure it's done in a way that is healthy and is affordable for others that may not be as well off as the $100,000 job employees at the Micron plant. Are there any other questions? I don't see any other hands up on this screen. I got to flip to the second panel. I don't see any other hands up or anything in the chat. Your last chance. I want to, before we go, I'll say, I see Brent has his hand up. I want to not forget, though, to thank our speakers today for all their efforts and for spending their afternoon with us. Brent, if you want to make a comment.
Yeah, I was just curious. what your sense and maybe other sense is of how the community, to gauge the community sense, are people concerned and want to comment, want to participate, or are people thinking overall we need economic development in our area, this is an opportunity we can't lose, don't want to lose, and are people, I don't know what the expression, crossing their fingers or whatever body parts they want to use and hoping that this is going to go well, and thinking, well, I'm not living in the immediate impact area, so even if things go wrong there a bit, many of us will be okay somehow. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
I saw a couple hands go up and answer to this. I think Kadisha's was first and then Don.
I will say in the beginning, when I started doing this organizing work, a lot of people were either like skeptical that the project was never going to happen, or they were just super excited about the economic promises. As the DEIS process came closer, and as I started speaking a little bit more about the environmental concerns, people started to get a little bit more scared and have a little bit more questions about it. And most recently on July 2nd, when we did the Clay Town Hall, I just shared a YouTube clip of News Channel 9 interviewing the audience members and residents as they were leaving the town hall. And a lot of the concerns that they raised, they spoke about on this clip. So that can just show you a little bit about what's bubbling up really most recently. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Don.
Yeah, that was my sense as well, is that the evolution thought has been from, oh, this is going to be great, to, oh, wait a minute, as people hear more and more about what are the actual the magnitude of this and the implications on the environment, are a little more hesitant about it. And the other thing I want to mention is that I think there's a general realization that, yeah, this is going to happen, and there's no way we can to change it. I think that, or not, I shouldn't say that's a realization. That's a sense that I get. But I'm always encourage people to jump in and do comment on it, so because it can be changed. It can be improved. There's a lot of room for improvement, as you've heard in this discussion today.
Yeah. One other side might be, although perhaps it's a small number, under Dick Cornbluth's guidance, a petition drive was mounted to try to convince the county to give us more time to review this. I think it was, I don't know the final number, maybe Dick can say, as like over 1,600 people put their name on the petition, believing that the community needed more time to evaluate all this and submit some comments on this thing. So that's one indication. I will say about the deadline. I read something in the SEQRA rules where there certainly is a hard and fast deadline for submitting comments of August 11th, and those comments need to be responded to as long as they're substantial comments. Comments about typos and other incidental things may not need to be responded to, but substantial comments must be responded to by the lead agents, and maybe I guess with Micron as well, in the final. Before they release the final EIS. You can submit comments afterwards. It doesn't mean that they will get that they won't have an effect. They may have an effect, but they don't need to be responded to and considered. But so in terms of the community's response to this project, I hope it doesn't end after August 11th. I mean, there is still going to be a lot of work to do to try to convince the community to adopt the sustainable practices that we all have in mind, and maybe continue to make changes in this project. So, you know, this is this is going to be a long process, and it's only beginning. Dick, you're muted, Dick.
Just a final comment, I guess. There's a whole other critical issue.
Oh, you're muted again.
Hit the button. Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry. So this is goes to Khadijah's concerns also and what she's working on. When the EIS process is done, it doesn't end the critical conversation between the community and Micron, because there's a whole other critical issue that has to do with. I'm not muted, right?
You're good.
It has to do with jobs, that has to do with hiring, that has to do with social justice and economic justice. And that is actually addressed in another document. It's not just a conversation in the community. It's actually enshrined in the Green Chips Act agreements with Micron around jobs, et cetera. So we're not done interacting and having conversations with Micron and with the state of New York around the issues that are critical to our community. So I'm just putting it out there. So, you know, gear up, because once the EIS process is over, the next process begins. And we will be then talking about jobs and equity. So I'm just mentioning it.
Thank you very much. And with that, we probably should bring this
Well-
meeting to a close. Thanks all of you for being with us today and giving your attention to our speakers, and for our speakers for their hard work on this. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.